Hello students, thank you for joining me here once again in SJ's classes. In this video lesson, we will be discussing chapter 7 of Animal Farm. In the previous chapter, we saw that the animals were living the lives of slaves. They had to work more, and Napoleon said that there will be work even on Sundays. But this work was voluntary. But there was a condition. The condition was that if they don't appear for the Sunday work, then their rations will be reduced by half. So we see that the animals have no choice and that they are forced to work. We also see in detail the character of Boxer. He is a strong, sturdy horse, and he is a source of motivation and inspiration for all the animals on the farm, and he helps them at all moments that it came to the point that nothing could have been done without Boxer. So we see this inspirational character in this particular chapter as well. We also find that the pigs decide to engage in business with the outside world. A Mr. Wimper, who was a solicitor, had agreed to mediate between Animal Farm and the outside world. The animals thought that they remembered that there was an agreement against engaging in trade with the outside world. But Squealer and the other pigs are able to convince them that it might have been one of the workings of Snowball. There was nothing like a policy or agreement made against trading. Now, it was also in this particular chapter that we saw that the pigs start to live in the farmhouse. Now, it was earlier decided that the farmhouse will be kept as a museum and that none of the animals would reside in it. There was also a commandment against it, that no animal shall sleep in bed. Now, this commandment, the animals remembered it, and when they went to one side of the side of the barn where the commandments were written, they saw that the commandment read, "No animal shall sleep in bed with sheets." Squealer later on explains that bed is something which is used by everyone to sleep. Sheets are human invention, and that is what you need to stay away from. So there is a justification to the commandment that is written on the side of the barn. We know that it wasn't that what was written earlier. The commandment was no animal shall sleep in beds, but the pigs have turned it in their favor by adding the phrase with sheets. It is also in chapter 6 that we find that the windmill that they were constructing is demolished by a strong wind. Chapter 6 ends with Napoleon's claim that it is Snowball who has uh, actually made possible the destruction of the windmill. So these are the important events that you saw in chapter 6. Let us look at chapter 7. Let us look at some of the important events in chapter 7 of Animal Farm. Now, chapter 7 begins on a pessimistic note as well, just like chapter 6. It is winter and the animals are trying their best to cope up with the weather as well as the need to rebuild the windmill. It's in chapter 6 that we witness that after a strong gale, the windmill is demolished and they have to rebuild it because the human beings are watching over the farm. They want to see whether the animals will continue building the farm or they will drop it. It's a matter of prestige for them, so they want to rebuild. So they take all their might to rebuild the windmill. The animals carried on as best as they could with the rebuilding of the windmill, well knowing that the outside world was watching them and that the envious human beings would rejoice and triumph in the mill if the mill were not finished on time. So, the very first paragraph of chapter 7 gives us the idea that the animals are again ready to put in effort to rebuild the windmill. In spite of all the bad things, unfortunate events that have been happening on the farm, they haven't lost hope at all. They still have hope. It was indeed a cruel work because the weather was bad. They did not have much to eat, and the work of windmill, as they decided to build it thicker, they had to collect more stones, more boulders. So the work was indeed cruel. The squealer kept on talking about the joy of service and the dignity of labor, and thereby tried to motivate the animals. But things did not work well on Animal Farm, and in January the food fell short. For days the animals had nothing to eat but things that were leftovers, the remainings of the previous days, and mangels. Now starvation seemed to stare them in the face. So few months after Mr. Jones expelled uh, Mr. Jones was expelled from the farm, the animals are staring at starvation. And that shows that the farm is not being managed in a proper manner. Now, things weren't okay on the farm, but Napoleon didn't want the outside world to know about this. He, along with the other pigs, wanted to conceal this from the outside world. And human beings, they still spoke rumors about Animal Farm. They state that they were continuing to resort to cannibalism and infanticide, that they were fighting for food between each other. So human beings were spreading the rumors just like before. So Napoleon was actually aware of the bad results that might follow if the real facts of the food shortage were known to the outside world. And therefore, he decides to make use of Mr. Wimper. Mr. Wimper, as I said earlier, is the person who mediates the businesses, the trade between Animal Farm and the outside world. So Napoleon uses Mr. Wimper to uh, propagate the idea that there is nothing like food shortage on Animal Farm. What he does is that Mr. Wimper was invited to the farm to see all the food stock on the farm, and certain animals were selected from the group to remark casually in between the visit that the ration had been increased. So Napoleon uses all these tricks to convey indirectly to the outside world that there was no shortage of food happening on the farm. Indeed, there was shortage, but Napoleon didn't want the outside world to know about it, and so he uses this trick. He uses Mr. Wimper to actually trick the people who are there outside the farm. In spite of all the effort, later on it was understood that there was a severe shortage of food on the farm, and it was necessary that trade or business was done with the outside world so that they can procure enough grains for at least for the winter season, so that they can survive it. Now, one important thing that you come across in chapter 7 is that Napoleon rarely appeared in public. We saw it earlier that it was for Napoleon that the pigs moved into the farmhouse. You might remember Squealer's statement that uh, the pigs or Napoleon must live in a place that suits his dignity. This is a statement that he made in the previous chapter, and that was one of the reasons for the pigs residing in the farmhouse. So Napoleon had made himself into some sort of a leader or a celebrity like a figure, and this continued to happen on the farm. Now you see that Napoleon rarely appeared in public, and when he appeared in a ceremonial manner with the escort of 6 dogs who closely surrounded him, something like black hats who come along with important figures, especially political figures, and they growled when someone came near. So this gave the animals the impression that they were not supposed to go near their leader, near comrade Napoleon. So Napoleon was gradually isolating himself, and he was transforming himself into a leader-like figure who was not that easily accessible. And frequently it happened that he did not even appear on Sunday mornings. That is the time when pigs used to give them the instructions for the next week. But Napoleon did not even appear in that particular episode as well. But what he did is that he issued his orders through one of the other pigs, and mostly it was Squealer who gave them the orders. Now, it is in this chapter that we see that for the first time since the expulsion of Jones, there was something resembling a rebellion. And this was done by the hens. The revolt, the retaliation arose from the side of the hens. That happened because one Sunday morning, Squealer announced to the hens that the hens must surrender their eggs because Napoleon had accepted through Whymper a contract for 400 eggs a week. This contract was made because the price that they got for these eggs could be used to purchase the grain and meal to keep the farm going till winter was over. So this was a contract that Napoleon made with Whymper. They sell him additional 400 eggs, and with that money they will purchase meals and food for the farm. The hens revolted at this. They were actually gearing up for their spring sit so that their young ones will be hatched, and that is the time when Napoleon decides that all these eggs will be sold to Mr. Whymper. So the hens revolt against this. They raise a terrible cry when they listen to Squealer's statement that they must surrender all their eggs, and they revolted by flying onto the roof. And what they did is that they would lay their eggs onto the floor, and this would actually smash the eggs. So this is the way that the hens revolted against Napoleon's orders. But Napoleon acted swiftly, and he also acted ruthlessly. He is gradually turning into an authoritarian, an autocrat, a person who does not listen to others, who makes decision all by himself. So he acts ruthlessly. He orders the hens' rations to be stopped and decreed, which means that he gave orders that any animal giving so much as a grain of corn to a hen should be punished by death. Now look at the punishment being given there. Punishment is death. If you give a grain of food, a grain of meal to hen who are actually revolting against Napoleon, they would be punished by death. So that is the kind of status that Napoleon has grown up to or risen up to. He is ready to punish his fellow beings with death if they are not ready to listen to his command. Now, all this while, you hear nothing about Snowball. You find in chapter 5 that he was chased away from the farm by the fierce looking dogs of Napoleon, and nothing is heard. But suddenly, early in the spring, an alarming thing was discovered. It was discovered that Snowball was secretly frequenting the farm by night. And whenever something went wrong, it became usual to attribute it to Snowball. The animals would say Snowball had come in the night and done it. When the key of the store shed was lost, the whole farm was convinced that Snowball had thrown it down the well. When the drain was blocked up, someone would certainly say that Snowball had come in the night and done it. It is taken up to an extent when the cows declare that Snowball crept into their stalls and milked them in their sleeps. So every unfortunate event that happens on the farm was attributed as the doing of Snowball. Now Napoleon takes this up. He decrees that there should be a full investigation into Snowball's activities. And one evening, Squealer calls all the animals together, and with an alarmed expression on his face, he tells them that he has some serious news to report. And the news is that Snowball has sold himself to Frederick of Pinchfield. And as per Squealer's statement, Snowball is gearing up along with Frederick to attack Animal Farm. He also says that Snowball in was an accomplice of Mr. Jones from the very start. Now, as readers, we know that this isn't the case, but this is how the pigs, especially Squealer, is exploiting the farm, and all these are being done as per the instruction, as per the command of Napoleon. Squealer says that Snowball had been he had been an accomplice of Mr. Jones from the very start, and he was a secret agent of Mr. Jones from the very beginning. Now the animals feel little bit uneasy at this. They did remember that Snowball fought from their side, so the animals were stupefied. Snowball as the reason behind the destruction of the windmill, and all these were weren't that easy to be digested for the animals. But since they had a very poor memory, Squealer and the other pigs are able to exploit that, and they are able to convince the animals that Snowball was indeed a criminal. Now it is in chapter 7 that you find that yet another commandment is violated. Earlier in chapter 6 you saw that the commandment which read no animal shall sleep in beds were violated, and instead of that no animal shall sleep in bed with sheets was written on the barn wall. Now Napoleon one day announces all, or instead orders all animals to assemble in the yard, and he gives a high-pitched whimper, and immediately the guard dogs they bound forward and seize 4 pigs by the ear and drags them. Now, these pigs, if you have read the novel, you will understand that these pigs actually revolted against Napoleon at the very beginning. And they revolted when Napoleon decided that there will be no more meetings that will happen. And what happens later is a cruel murder. Without any further prompting, these pigs confessed that they had been secretly in touch with Snowball, and that they collaborated with him in destroying the windmill, and that they had entered into an agreement with him to hand over Animal Farm to Mr. Frederick. We do not understand why the pigs say so, but right now this is what they confess, and all the animals believe that it is Snowball who actually let these pigs, and caused the destruction of the windmill. Napoleon again demands other animals to confess the things that they have done as an accomplice to Snowball, and 3 hens who rebelled against Napoleon over the egg issue, they come forward and they state that Snowball had appeared to them in a dream and incited them to disobey Napoleon's orders. So what you find is that all those animals who had been rebelling against or revolting against Napoleon's decisions are the ones who are coming to the forefront and confessing that they are actually accomplices to Snowball. Then a sheep follow. He confesses that he had urinated in the drinking pool, and this was done as it was urged by Snowball. And what happens later on is that all of these animals, pigs, hens, sheep, all of these animals are killed on the spot. And when this was over, the animals, after witnessing a bloody murder, they crept away as one single body. They were shaken and they were miserable. They did not know which was more shocking, the treachery of the animals who had leashed themselves with Snowball, or the cruel retribution they had just witnessed. So they were in a state of confusion. They did not know which was more violent, which was more uh, shocking, whether it was Snowball's treachery or the violent punishments that were given to Snowball's accomplices. Now, since Jones had left the farm until today, none of the animals were killed by any animal on the farm, but today that happened, and all the animals were sad and disappointed. Now, Clover, she is disappointed as well, and she uh, gives us something like an aside. If she could have spoken, uh, she would have said that it was not for this that they had conducted the rebellion. This is not what that they had aimed at when they had set themselves years ago to work for the overthrow of the human race. And she starts to sing Beasts of England. All of the animals join and they sing Beasts of England together. That is when Squealer comes in, attended by two dogs, and he announces that by a special decree of Comrade Napoleon, Beasts of England had been abolished. So, singing Beasts of England was actually a, a method adopted by the animals to console themselves, but as of now, Comrade Napoleon had abolished it. Muriel asks Squealer why he had done it, and Squealer says that it is no longer needed. It was the song of the rebellion. As the rebellion is now completed, the song is now useless, and therefore Napoleon had abolished the Beasts of England. And he also adds that Minimus, who is a pig as well as the poet on the farm, he had composed another poem beginning with Animal Farm, Animal Farm, never through me shall thou come to harm. And this was supposed to be sung every Sunday morning after the hoisting of the flag. But the animals found it that the new song, the new poem, the new tune, it did not come up to the tune of Beasts of England or the energy that it gave while they sang Beasts of England. So it is on that particular note that chapter 7 ends. Thank you so much for listening and watching. In the next video lesson, I will discuss chapter 8. Thank you.